dive into the world of Shiism. So when I first decided that, Shiaism is for me, and that I accepted the path of Ahlul Bayt, was a little bit after learning about the tragedy of Karbala, and then after that I started looking more into Imam Ali and his life and what actually happened. Some of the answers that started to make sense. I seen some battles like the Battle of Jamal. I'd see Ali radiallahu anhu fights against Aisha radiallahu anha. And at first I didn't think anything of it. But then I was thinking, how can, thousands of Muslims die in this battle and there's not one right or wrong side? If I was there, one question that I was asked before by a Muslim when I was online researching a lot, he asked me, he said, if you're a Christian, right, you believe that Jesus, has to be sacrificed for you to be saved. He said, if you were there during the time of Jesus being sacrificed, would you try and save him? Or what side would you be on? Because if you save him, then he's not dying for your sins. So, who do you accept as God? And it's kind of like a situation that basically shows all the imperfections in it. In Sunni Islam, if you were there during the time in the Battle of Jamal with Ali on one side and Aisha on the other, you have to choose. There's a right or a wrong side. And that made me think about many other things. There's a lot of other battles, obviously Battle of Safin, the Prophet said, Ammar ibn Yasir, he'll die shaheed on the right side. Who killed Ammar ibn Yasir? Ammar ibn Yasir was killed by Muawiyah. So a lot of these things, it just kept adding up, and I didn't know any of these things. I know I know about, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, a lot of their good deeds, while I was Sunni. But I never heard any of these other very controversial things. And once I started seeing that, it was like an onion. It just kept peeling and peeling and peeling, and it kept smelling worse. And Shiism, everything that I was told about it, they had an answer for. There was a lot of things that I was very uncomfortable about, about Mut'a, about, the 12 Imams, and do you pray to them, or what is it, tawassul, or, etc., all these questions. I got an answer for it, and I got not just a Quran verse, but I also got hadith to back it up, tafsir, and all of these things. And a lot of the Shias that I listened to online, they were just extremely knowledgeable in history. It was like sitting in a history class. Most of the lecturers that I heard that were Sunni, they talked more about just kind of like, rational thoughts, like, okay, of course God is one. Like, they would talk about Christians, like, how can you believe, that Jesus is the Son of God? Don't you have, a mind? God is one. So when I was becoming Shia, and I was thinking, like, all of these guys, they would talk so confidently to these Christians and saying, how can you believe in the Trinity and all these things? You're an adult. Well, I was thinking, if you guys are talking about how can they believe that, you have Imam Ali. He was born in the Kaaba. He was, the successor of the Prophet. All of these things that he has, under his belt. And you put him as the same as other people. All of these things that I was seeing in Christianity that I, thought that made me doubt, I was finding them a lot within Sunni Islam. And Shia Islam, I did not find any faults. Every question that I had, I was given a very satisfying answer. So when I first, reverted or converted again to Shiism, that was, I would say, my real conversion. Because before, when I was Sunni, I used to eat, anything chicken, there was, haram food and stuff like that. When I became Shia, I was like, okay, that's it. Like, I've, looked at it from every angle possible. This is, the true religion of God. So I took it very seriously. I remember one day I was at home, and for a while now I've been eating haram meat while I was Shia, and I was like, okay, I can't. In my head I kept saying, I can't do this. I can't go on for much longer eating this and knowing that it's wrong. So one day my mom, she made a meal for us. We sat down, and I looked at it and I'm like, all right, that's it. This is my last meal. This is it. Like, I can't keep doing this anymore. So I told my mom, I said, listen, I'm going to eat this right now, but I'm telling you from now on, I'm not eating any more meat unless it's halal meat, okay? And my mom thought I was joking, and my mom actually didn't even understand, the concept of like halal and not, halal meat. So, of course, what's she gonna do? She's my mother. She's been cooking food for me since I was a kid, and I've been eating it. My mom's an amazing cook, obviously. So she was very angry. I knew it was gonna happen because I know my mom's thoughts about Islam. She's, it's been very hard practicing, around my mom because I know it bothers her a lot, and she's, she prays a lot for me. She always thinks that I'm gonna come back and stuff like that, and always invites me to her Bible studies. But sometimes I go just for whatever. But anyways, I remember she told me, she said, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna start eating, blessed meat, then I'm not gonna cook anything for you anymore. So at that time, between 18 and 20 years old, when I graduated from high school until 20, my mom, she didn't cook any more meals for me. I had to cook everything for myself at home. That was probably the hardest time of my life. My parents at that time, they got divorced. My father, he moved back to Lebanon. I was home with my mother and my younger sister. I inherited a lot more responsibilities. And on top of that, I made my mom much more angrier than she needed to be. So at that time, it was very tough for me. And some of the friends that I made at the Sunni mosque that I used to go to, I didn't tell them right away. I kind of just didn't really say anything. I would bring up certain Shia beliefs, subtly. I kind of was using taqiyya in a way. I would bring up issues like, do you think the Prophet would never make a mistake? Or, come on, Imam Ali, I really think that he deserves a higher status than what he has, stuff like that. But eventually, they figured it out. I started praying differently. They started asking questions. Some of my friends, they were Maliki, so they prayed with their hands down, so they didn't really get right away that I was Shia. They just seen that I was starting to pray a little differently. But then, I started saying some stuff during, around Muharram, when I would go to the mosque and they would fast, on the 10th of Muharram. And I would find out exactly why they do that. It's, my friend, he told me, he's like, the 10th of Muharram is a good day, we should fast. And I was like, what do you mean? Why do we need to fast? His name was Fuad. I told him, I said, Fuad, this is the day that the grandson of the Prophet was martyred. This is a day we need to mourn. We should think about exactly, how, his family dealt with it and all these things and stuff like that. And he said, that was the first time I remember they're like, are you Shia? And I was like, I know I couldn't hide it. And I was like, yeah, I'm Shia. I can't do these things anymore. I know what's right and what's wrong. I can't pretend like I don't see them. And after that, I noticed they started, distancing themselves, so they stopped, asking me to hang out as much. I remember one time after a few months, they asked me to come to their house. It was like a big group of friends. They invited me down into their basement where we used to hang out. And, they were very serious. Very, very serious. They're usually always joking around, stuff like that, but they were all very serious. And at this time, they were all they grew their beards very long, and they were wearing dish dashes all the time. I noticed a big difference within a few months, period. They sat down, they told me, they're like, for us, listen, you're our friend, and, you can't be Shia. We care about you, we don't want you to go to hell. You can't be Shia. They're like, what's the deal? Why are you Shia? Just because your father is Shia, you don't have to be Shia. First thing I told him was, I'm not Shia because my father's Shia. I was Sunni before, so obviously, I'm not Shia now just because my father told me to. If he told me to be Shia, I would have been Shia a long time ago if I wanted to believe it from him. So they started asking questions. I would give them, a lot of things that, I was saying, ways of doing wudu and stuff like that. hadiths of, Abu Hanifa and Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. But everything that they said, they're like, no, this is not true, and this is not true. Anytime I'd ask them, okay, can you give me, an argument for this from the Quran, from a hadith, anything like that? They just say, no, like you guys, you have made up, like hadiths, they're not, strong. Even they would say you have a different Quran. I told them, well, okay, if we have a different Quran, okay, you have a Quran over there, let's take your Quran and let's see, how it goes. So, obviously that didn't get anywhere. I didn't hang out with, my Sunni friends as much. So I started trying to look for Shias within my area. By within my area, I mean like, they lived at least an hour and a half away. Because where I live, there's nothing. There's no Shia, there's no Muslims, let alone anything, ethnic at all. So I started looking like on Facebook, anything for like Shia groups within Massachusetts, I found a couple that lived in a nearby city, and I sent them a message. I said, hey, is there any like Shia mosque around here? Is there any Shia like scholars, sheikhs, something like that? And, alhamdulillah, he got me connected with some brothers, and, I was able to go to an actual majlis for Imam Hussein. I remember my the first majlis I ever went to during Ashura, it was the night of Abbas. And I didn't know at all what was being said. It was all in Arabic. Matter of fact, it wasn't even a lecturer. It was, we went to a small house. There must have been like 30 people at max. And we were just watching a TV of a guy speaking, and I didn't understand anything he was saying. I'd ask, one of the guys I was with, who was he talking about? He said he was talking about, Abu Fadl al-Abbas. And he was, explaining to me more detail in the story. And I remember that day was like very strong for me. I was like, I remember from that day I was like, that's it, I'm gonna find an area where there's Shia, and I have to be there, because not only I'm very isolated from Muslims in general, but like being around Shia, there's nobody I know. So, when I was 20 years old, I transferred to a college that was, in Boston, closer to the inner city. And there was, a Shia center there that was a little bit bigger. I went there, and, that's when I learned a lot more. I would read much more books, Peshawar Nights, Najl al-Balagha, of course, a lot of books by Imam Zain al-Abidin. That was, I'd say the biggest, point when I was Shia was the first night that I went to a majlis, for for Abu Fadl al-Abbas. The Ahlul Bayt, they saved me from a very, like troubling existence in life. When I was, younger, when you come from like a mixed family, when your mother's, American, Anglo-Saxon white, your father's, Arab, he's Muslim, and my mother's Christian, you have an identity crisis. I didn't know where I belonged. I was struggling being, a Christian. I didn't know like if, Muslim is the right faith and stuff like that. But once I got satisfied with, the path of Ahlul Bayt, they saved me from a lot of things. Most of my family, they're not, Muslim, and I see their lifestyles are much different than mine. Everybody I grew up around are not Muslim. They got into a lot of drugs, alcohol, partying, stuff like that. And I know I could have easily been influenced, with that if I didn't have these role models like Imam